Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to take a look at lakes. So if you haven't opened up your Unit 2 notes yet, please go ahead and do so that you can fill in the needed information on your note sheet as we go through today's presentation. Let's take a look at the lakes that we're going to examine today. We're going to look at the Great Salt Lake, and then we're going to look at these 5 lakes together, because collectively these 5 lakes of Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior are known as the Great Lakes. So starting with the Great Salt Lake, it's in the state of Utah. And the interesting thing about the Great Salt Lake is, just as its name implies, it is a saltwater lake. Just like the oceans are saltwater. But it's unusual to have saltwater lakes. And the reason why is, rivers carry minerals with them. So the rivers and streams flow into the Great Salt Lake, but the Great Salt Lake has no outlet. So any mineral that's deposited in there stays in there. Well, the salt from the area gets deposited in this lake. And since it has no outlet, the salt content stays within that lake. And it actually makes it have a higher salt density than the oceans do. I've been fortunate enough to visit the Great Salt Lake. In fact, if you are there, you've got to go swimming. Because if you've ever been to the ocean, you know that in salt water it's easier to naturally float than a regular swimming pool. So we wanted to try it out in the Great Salt Lake. So we went swimming in the Great Salt Lake, and it is super buoyant. You are able to easily float without any effort in the Great Salt Lake. So super neat experience for this lake. So let's take a little closer look at showing you the area around the Great Salt Lake.
Great Salt Lake. Covering 1,700 square miles, it's the largest American lake west of the Mississippi and the biggest saltwater lake in the Western Hemisphere. What makes Great Salt Lake so unique is that its water is up to 5 times saltier than the ocean, too salty to support fish and most other aquatic life. The lake is considered a terminal lake, which means there's no outlet. The small amounts of salt in the rivers and streams that flow into it build up over time. With nowhere for the water in the lake to go, it evaporates in the hot Utah sun, leaving vast deposits of salt behind. In some places, the water is so salty that people can float, just like they do in the Dead Sea, except that they're here in the middle of the Utah desert. Evaporation also keeps the lake shallow. It's possible to wade a quarter of a mile out into water and still only be up to your knees. But even with all this salt, wildlife thrives in the lake shores, especially here on Antelope Island. Despite the name, the island is actually a home for bison. Herders brought 12 bison to Antelope Island in 1897. Today, it's home to a 550-strong herd.
Alright, so let's switch over to some freshwater lakes, and that's going to be our Great Lakes. And I said we're going to look at them collectively because they are the largest group of freshwater lakes in the world. And so we have these 5 lakes here, and they kind of help to form a border between the United States and Canada. But these 5 lakes are all freshwater lakes, and collectively we call them the Great Lakes. Now you can see the state of Pennsylvania is here, and Pennsylvania does border one of those Great Lakes, and that's Lake Erie. So let's look at the biggest of the Great Lakes, and that is Lake Superior. Lake Superior is the biggest of the Great Lakes, and its deepest point is over 1,300 feet deep, so that's a very deep lake. Lake Michigan is the only one of the Great Lakes that's completely within the United States. All of the other 4 Great Lakes actually border part of Canada as well. Lake Huron's the second biggest of the Great Lakes. Lake Ontario's the smallest of the Great Lakes. But Lake Erie, the one that touches us, oh, I missed it. Where'd Lake Erie go? Whoop. Lake Erie, the one that touches us, is actually the shallowest of the Great Lakes. Lake Erie is still a big lake, only 210 feet deep at its deepest point. Lake Raystown actually has some areas that are deeper than this, and Lake Raystown's a man-made lake by putting a dam on the Juniata River, but there are parts of Lake Raystown that are deeper than the big lake of Lake Erie. So that's a quick overview of some of our major lakes in the United States. So at this point, go ahead back to Google Classroom, check on your next assignment and complete it. And if you have any questions, reach out to me. If not, we'll see you next time.